We have made it to the last chapter, the last verse. We've made it to the last big scene of the movie. We've come to the final credits of the 10 Commandments. Finally. Maybe we can soon move on to something else. But what is the last thing that God wants us to know? What is it out of all of these things that God would want us to remember as the last thing, the 10th commandment? What does God find necessary for us to ponder and pray about on this last Sunday? Well, are you ready for a test? Remember my first Sunday, I gave you a pop quiz at this point, right? I said, good luck, right? How do you think you could do now? Are you ready? No, I'm not going to make you do that. I trust that you have been thinking through them and that you've been trying to remember them. And the kids know it. And so they are leading us in this charge to remember and embody the 10 Commandments. Honestly, I'll tell you, I was a little skeptical when I first thought about challenging them to remember them. But haven't you been impressed? They know them, but they know them well. They don't just try to remember them. They truly know, which is really cool. And I think today as we go to the 10th commandment, I think this one is quite climactic. It's a quite climatic conclusion to the 10. And I really think that today's commandment, even though it's the last, is really fundamental in understanding the other 9 commandments. So one thing that I know about dating Hannah is the strong influence her parents have had on her upbringing. She comes from a really great family with great parents. And as many parents do, they provide wisdom and guidance for their children on really important things like money and work habits, and faith and academics. Well, for Hannah, her dad's wisdom on dating has been quite influential. You know, one of the pieces of the story, one of the things her dad communicated to her on a consistent basis was that Hannah was to guard her heart. Her dad would tell her that over and over, guard your heart. She was encouraged not just to open up to anyone or just any guy, and to make sure she doesn't become too serious with just anyone. So when I started dating Hannah, I realized that this would be a really slow-paced relationship, which was probably good for both of us. But then I truly had to build the trust so that Hannah knew that I was worth opening her heart up to. And thankfully, I think that has worked a little bit. But what makes Hannah so special is that she took her dad's words seriously. She guarded her heart through many years and a few boys, but she's guarded her heart. Today's commandment, I think truly, is about taking those same words and applying them to our life. To guard our heart. To guard the inward side of our lives. On face value, this commandment basically says do not covet your neighbor's wife, or your neighbor's house, or the male or female slave, or their animals or livestock, but that we should not covet anything of theirs. It's like a total ban on coveting. But I think at the root of covet is a root of misguided or misdirected desire. In fact, I think coveting or desiring what we want over the ones of God or others causes us to disobey the other 9 commandments. I think humans are truly drawn by desire. We are led by having deep desire, strong feelings about wanting something, right? A promotion, or we want a bigger house. We're drawn by these things, or we want other people. We're drawn to someone. And sometimes this is really pure and really helpful and private. But sometimes it's really sometimes not good and sometimes public. When someone reaches or wants something that is maybe not necessarily their property to take. You know, with that language, you may think of like the 8th commandment, right? What's the 8th commandment? Do not steal. I heard it, right? Yeah. Do not steal. You may think that this one actually talks about do not stealing, right? That physical property of taking someone either the worth or taking someone's property and taking it as your own. And almost it sounds like that, how this commandment could be that. But I think this commandment's a little bit deeper. It's not about the action of taking something, but it's the heart of wanting to take something. It's a heart of wanting to do that. You know, one might call this jealousy, as the kids reminded us, or coveting anything of our neighbors. This command, do not covet, shows us that obedience to all of the other commands the other 9, the long list, all of that begins in our hearts. That true obedience is not complete without heart obedience. That the commandments are not necessarily just about loving God, or just about loving other people outwardly, tangibly, and practically, but they are also about knowing how our hearts are before God. That this command has an inward focus about it. All of the other commands are outward. Do not steal. Do not take this thing. Do not lie. They're all outward. But this one is inward. But there are probably other words that we can use, right? We can use passion, or envy, or craving, or greed, or jealousy, or obsession, or longing, or lusting for someone or something that is not supposed to be ours. But we can remind ourselves that really this is rooted in the Garden of Eden again. A couple of times I've referenced the garden in Genesis 3. And it seems very clear that when Adam and Eve, they were given everything, right? It was the perfect world. And God said, don't eat from this, right? Of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. But what got in their way? Coveting. They longed for something that wasn't supposed to be theirs. They longed to eat from that fruit, to now have this knowledge that only God had known of good and evil. That really this, yet again, commandment is rooted in Genesis 3, when sin entered the world, longing for something that wasn't supposed to be ours. So covetousness comes from a place where we maybe sometimes are dissatisfied with our life. Covetousness says that we don't trust God to provide for us, that deep down that we think God is holding out on us. And instead that we have to fight for something instead. And it reminds me of like individualism and the American dream. What's the American dream? Does anyone know what the American dream is? It's an elusive phrase that we use all the time. What would you say is the American dream? Everything, right? What would you say? If you had to define the American dream, how would you define the American dream? To be successful, right? What else? I think of one maybe helpful line, but maybe it's not right.
Freedom.
What'd you say?
Freedom.
What'd you say? What the language I was thinking, maybe it's not helpful, was keeping up with the Joneses.
Yeah, keeping up with the Joneses.
Right? When I think about the American dream, I think about how we're to keep up with the Joneses, right? The white picket fence, right? The nice houses, the perfect family. And I wondered, but how much this commandment speaks against that a little bit. Against this wanting, this desiring for what the other people around us have, the houses and all of those things. It doesn't help our consumeristic world. That did you know, and this is crazy, that we are the most in-debt society that has ever existed. And there are some maybe real plausible reasons why some people are in debt, or there's plenty of other examples of we're in debt because we want, right? We want stuff. We want more things. We want what the Joneses have, and we're trying to keep up. I think the covetousness could simply be desiring something our neighbor or our friends or our family have. Money, maybe a healthier marriage on the outside, maybe better behaved children, maybe even a nicer home, maybe a more supportive husband, maybe even a car. But what other things do you hear that people covet in our world? What do you hear? Or people are jealous about? Money, the amount of money someone has, the salary they make. Yeah. What else? Do we covet anything else in our world?
I think achievement and the praise of other people.
Yeah, what was the second one?
The praise of other people in their confidence.
Yeah. Achievement, yes, right. The applause, the attention from someone else, yes. Well, do we have covered anything else? Job. Yes.
Well, the things that probably apply. Some people can afford to take trips and travel frequently, go to exotic places like Australia.
Thanks.
Other people that can travel all the time, you say, oh, it must be nice.
Speechless. Write it down. 11:05. August 2nd. Christmas speechless. It's real, right? I mean, that's a real thing. The nature of jealousy and coveting and desiring what someone else can do, right? Or what they can't do, or those type of things. You're really right. And what money can buy, absolutely. Yes. Thanks for humbling me for a moment. What was that?
A big, beautiful home.
A big, beautiful home, right?
And servants.
And servants, right? Yeah. People to clean up after us, aides, yeah. We covet that. When we hear about them, we're like, oh, right? What would that be like if that was me? Right? We use that language. Anything else that we covet? A clean house. Yes. Yeah. Anything else? Joey.
A big house with 2 cars and a boat and a camper sitting in the driveway.
Oh, the camper, yeah, absolutely. 2-car garage. There are people that use that language, right? Use that language we want, that desire for something that we don't have, but we want to achieve and work at through our job. And so we want to find the right job to get us there, to have the right amount of money, to do all of those things. Coveting is kind of part of our world, unfortunately, right? This desire for more or for different. And sometimes that desire is also in our own lives, right? Our own family, who they are, and how they act to us. And I was reminded last night that when we often compare our worst part of us to the best part of someone else. Does that make sense? We know our dirt, don't we? And so we compare our dirt, or we compare our baggage or our worst part of ourselves with the best part of someone else. And I thought that fit really well into coveting. We compare the worst part of our lives to the best outward part of someone else's life. And so we want that instead. We just think that they have it all together. But I think it's ultimately a matter of the heart. We want the best. We covet. We envy the best of our neighbors around us at the expense of trying to get rid of maybe the worst. And since this is the only commandment that deals directly inward, the only one that deals with our inward thoughts and being rather than actions, I think about freedom rule number 10. So we've been going through these freedom rules, and I think freedom rule number 10 is this: to guard our hearts. We can respond to the covetousness that creeps up into us by believing that God alone can provide everything that we need, and that God alone has done already everything for us. God showed Israel, the people who received the 10 Commandments, love, deliverance out of Egypt, out of slavery and grace, before God even gave Israel the law. And God continues to show us love today. I think it's out of this love that God gave you and me and the Israelites these commandments. God, I think, gave us these commandments so that we can remain pure and our actions can remain faithful. I don't think these commandments, like I said before, I don't think they're to be restrictions, not rules to confine, but I think rather they're to be given for freedom, for our hearts and for our actions, that we can be free people, that we can have freedom. I think we're given freedom in our hearts so that God alone is enough, and that we don't need anything but God. And so we are given freedom with our actions with other people. I don't think we need to lie or gossip about anyone. We do not need to steal or to take another person's spouse and treat them as our own. We don't need to kill, and we can honor our parents. All of these things, I think, will give us freedom and our actions. Freedom to remain pure in God. So I think this is the freedom God wanted us to have with other people. But then we were given freedom to rest, to take Sabbath, to take time away, to renew ourselves so that we can truly love God and love people better. We can remind ourselves through Sabbath that God alone is enough, and we don't have to be enough all the time. But then we're also given freedom so that we do not need to take the Lord's name in vain. Rather, we are given freedom to celebrate and love God. This love should be a freedom love where there are no other idols or other gods or something in the way of our pure love of God. I think these are freedom rules so that you and me, that we can be free. Free to unapologetically and sincerely love God and love our neighbor. I think this is the very foundation of our faith. I think this is it, folks. Love. Love God and love other people. Yet, I think we need to watch out for some things that get in the way of this freedom. We need to watch out for the distractions of the world, the distractions of the earth. We must guard our hearts. I'm more and more convinced that I have to be careful what I allow to enter my brain, or what I allow to enter my head or my heart. So much so I've been monitoring how much TV I watch, how much I listen to the news, how frequent I catch up with the political news or the breaking news, or how often I'm on social media. I'm careful with the TV shows I watch, the movies I watch, my internet usage, because I'm wanting my heart to remain pure. I want to guard my heart to keep Jesus at the center of it. There are people, activities, hobbies, and the social sphere that are trying, I know they're trying to take our focus off of Jesus. They want our attention. They want our allegiance, our thoughts, our actions. Some of those things are not bad and sinful, but some of them certainly are. The matter of the Ten Commandments can be wrapped up by saying God wants us to be free and wants us to remain centered, focused on God and God alone. Why? God knew, I think life was going to be messy. God knew that it was not going to be easy, that we would be drawn to things that are not good. God knew how sinful this world has become. And God knew that we would still be tempted every day. We're all tempted by something in this world. So at the freedom, at the center of it all, God gave you and I freedom. Freedom from this world and freedom from these temptations. I think Jesus' grace and work on the cross was the perfect action to set you and I free. We're free by delving in and wondering how the Ten Commandments can still be relevant for us today. I want us at State Line United Methodist Church to not be a busy church, to not be an active church, to not be a good church, to not be a happy church. I want you and I as a church to be a free church, where Jesus is at the center of our hearts and our lives. I want this church to be a place where we fight the temptations of this world and we choose Jesus instead. I want us to be free people of God. This morning is a holy and powerful moment where we can once again walk forward to partake in the communion of Jesus. But on this day, today, I think we have the ability to enter God's presence at the holy table of communion and ask God to purify and to renew our hearts. To ask God to purify us yet again so that we can better love Him and better love other people. It's the ability to renew all of us. When we recommit ourselves to the task, the good and yet the difficult task of being God's beloved children in this world. Today, as we go to this table, we come here reminding ourselves that God has been at work for years. That God 2,000 years ago was with a bunch of people who were trying to follow after Him, like us. They were called disciples. We too are trying to be disciples of Jesus. So as we were on our journey, as the disciples were on their journey, Jesus met with them often and taught and shared some incredible things. And yet something special happened on one of His last times with His disciples. He was with them, just eating a meal, the Passover time. And Jesus, during the meal, He took the bread. Interesting bread He took. And He lifted it up so everyone could see it around the table. This is friends, His fellow disciples like you and me. And He lifted it up. He said, "Take, eat, for this is my body, which has been given for you. Which has been given so you can renew your heart and your love, and that your heart can be guarded through my body. So they asked him that. Imagine sitting at the table with Jesus and eating this bread around that table. A holy moment that I think has the ability to transform their lives forever. So they went on there with their meal, they went on with their journey, they talked some more. And then Jesus took the cup of wine. And this time, he lifted it up again. Showed it to everyone. He said, all of you, drink from this. For this is the cup of the new covenant, the new salvation poured out for you and for the world. Do this as often as you can in remembrance of me. This was the cup that I think was to provide the true transformation in our hearts. And so on this day, the table is yet again prepared. But we have to do some things before that. So I'm going to invite us to have a moment of peace and quiet. A moment where you and I, we can confess our sins. Confess how our heart has been misguided, confused, and off-centered of what is crucial. Our hearts do that sometimes, don't they? They get a little off-centered. So let us have a moment where we acknowledge our sin and have a time of confession with Jesus. So let's enter that time.